She
All
started.
right, we're live. I'm going to make you
Okay.
host, and you can make me co-host.
We have Ann McDonald.
Yes, she's the chair.
Donna, can you make me a co-host, please?
Oh, that's me? Hold on. Hold on, let me share again. Participants, how do I make you co-host, Betsy?
Yeah,
You want to
and
be
the,
Go to-
co-host.
and the captioning has come across on YouTube, so we're good there.
Okay, I made you co-host, Betsy.
Okay, great. I'm going to be in the background. Hmm.
I believe we're just waiting for 2 more people to join, and then we can get started. We'll be getting started in just a second, everybody. Thank you for bearing with us.
Okay, everybody. So Donna set out the agenda. We basically got sort of three things on here. The first is to discuss the council feedback and maybe begin talking about an environmental scan. We're going to start talking about what we might want to do for the work session in January, and then Chris is going to provide an update, and we're going to talk through some of the stuff about the Criminal Justice Academy information that she sent out. So in that vein, I'll start off with, number one, in terms of discussing the council feedback. I gave sort of a real quick overview, and there wasn't a whole lot of feedback per se, although I think folks seemed interested and curious to take the topic on. So I don't know how anybody else felt about the council meeting. I don't know how we got a little bit of feedback from them. Like I said, I think they, asked some questions about, would it be possible for them to see other state plans? And we talked about sending that out. So I think that may be the only action item that we have from that piece. Does anybody have anything to add about council feedback, or whether or not I'm remembering correctly that they had asked about other plans?
Yeah, and this is George. I agree with you. There wasn't a whole lot of feedback, and it did seem like they were eager for a little bit more structure, maybe, and information that we could give them to. And so I think maybe that leads into January. And the other thing that I thought was that there did seem to be support for that hybrid model where you have aspirational and attainable goals in the same plan.
That's right, George. Thank you for that. I remember Victoria asked that, and I think we were talking about not only hybrid in terms of aspirational versus attainable goals, but also sort of the hybrid between a working document and a guidance document too.
Yeah.
So that'll be a tricky line to walk, and we'll try to figure out how to do that. I don't know, I was debating whether or not, how complicated this topic is, or how complicated we choose to make it, and whether or not, there needs to be some sort of ongoing communication with the council about the state plan. One of the things that we know that happens is if you only meet every quarter, you lose a lot of momentum. And you end up having to sort of revisit some of the things that you've done before. So I'm not really all that crazy about the idea of having to create one more thing that we have to do a monthly update on, but I'm also very willing to talk about that because that may be what's needed. I just don't know what that would look like. So I'm curious to hear what you all think.
I guess I'm wondering what the purpose of that would be, because I don't want to give extra duties around, but it could be helpful, but I think there needs to be a specific reason to do that. And particularly given the reception in the last council meeting, I'm not sure whether if we send them something every month, is that actually going to be something that people look at, or are they just going to look at it before the next council meeting? So I think a quarterly update provided with the council documents is good. Unless specific things that we want input on from the council, and then I think we have to do it at the meetings anyway. So.
Well, I was thinking that one of the emails that could go out would be some of those other state plans, because I haven't gone back and looked at the minutes, Donna, but I think there was some interest in us making them aware of what those other plans were. So, I also don't know, is that my job? Is that your job to do the follow-up? So getting some of that stuff clarified might be helpful. In terms of the environmental scan, that's one of those things. I don't know if we need to involve some other people in or not. We could send one or two quick survey questions that say, what do you think are the most pressing issues? Something like that. I don't know if we want to do, the whole SWOT analysis, or, to flip that on its head in a way that really spoke to me was a TOES analysis, which is exactly the same thing, but you start off with threats and opportunities before you get into strengths and weaknesses. Because a lot of times when you're doing a SWOT analysis, everybody's really engaged with the strengths and weaknesses part. And then by the time you get to the opportunities and threats, the enthusiasm has died off. And you start running out of time because everybody has spent so much time talking about strengths and weaknesses. So I'm curious to know what you guys think about conducting an environmental scan as well. This was part of the original sort of document that we created in terms of the timeline. Is that something that we need to do, or do we just need to start putting what we know on paper?
I'm gonna defer to the experts in the brain injury field. I feel like I don't have enough expertise to really comment on that, because I don't know where we stand with environmental scans. So I assume that the brain injury unit has a good handle, I know you would, Anne, of what's out there, but is it more about identifying the gaps?
I think that's a great question, George. I mean, I don't know that we've necessarily decided what that environmental scan entails. BIAV, through its information and referral program, provides TDARS annually a sort of real-time needs and resources assessment that highlights what people are looking for when they call us, why they're calling us, what services they're looking for, and that may be sort of sufficient for these purposes if that's what we'd like to do. So, when you do an environmental scan, you can go whole hog.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can just sort of scale it back a little bit. And, given our time frame and, how scattered we all are, I'm just not sure what the best approach is.
So Anne, this is Chris. When I look back over my notes at the first meeting, there was not a definitive decision, but a sense from the group that just coming off the priorities letter discussion, that there had been a lot of work gathered in the short term, and that Virginia, that the idea of looking at what the gaps are wasn't necessarily the best use of time, because there is a strong sense of what those are.
Okay.
I throw that out just to see if people still feel that way. It is a new world today. Are there, is there a quick, do people feel that there might be some value in a quick look? Do you want to dive deeper? What's your feeling?
Yeah, I'm really struggling with the question. I think it's a really good question, and I'm usually very supportive of gathering additional data, particularly if it's data that come from outlying groups or underrepresented groups that maybe we don't typically hear from. On the other hand, from what I know of environmental scans, is usually they're quite confirmatory. So they generally confirm the expert opinion, and tend to illuminate what we already know. So it could be a lot of work to continue to illuminate the data that we've already uncovered. So that's why I'm feeling it's like a both and, it's kind of a tug for me. I'm wondering, is there a way to scan? Are there places, are there like rocks that we need to uncover? Are there places where we maybe don't have voice and perspective coming in? Some of the more rural serving areas, for instance.
Did you all see a copy? I don't think we've shared a copy of the needs and resources assessment with you, have we? The one that BIAV gives to DARS?
I thought you reviewed it with all of council, but we can send it back out.
Yeah, we did do the presentation to council. But yeah, I was trying to find it, and I'm not having a whole lot of luck right now because, you can only successfully multitask so much. The needs and resources assessment, I think, is one of those things that we could, with the priorities document, the needs and resources assessment, pull out some of the big themes. We know that housing is one of it. We know that community-based supports and provider education, those always sort of show up in some of the things that we do. We don't necessarily have a lot of specific information around COVID and what that may require from us. I think that that's one of those areas we're still trying to figure out. Early on, there was just some thought that the rehabilitation needs of individuals who'd experienced COVID were, really no different than just general rehab needs due to deconditioning. But we do know that COVID is creating neurological impacts. We just don't have a lot of data on that yet. Yeah. So I don't know exactly, what we might want to include on the COVID front. Do we need to do maybe a quick lit review and see if there's anything that's showing up already? I'm just not sure. Yeah, I can't.
Hi, Ann. This is Victoria.
Hi,
I was
Victoria.
wondering if the information from the needs and resources assessment would be considered information that we already have on hand, that you mentioned earlier in the discussion on, how we get started. I think those areas might be the stones, Kara brought up. But yeah, I understand sort of where we are right now with trying to capture just some data or statistical information to back up where we're moving forward with the plan, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm having absolutely no luck at the moment trying to remember exactly where that needs and resources assessment is. I do think that in a lot of ways, between that and the priorities letter that we've already discussed, really does form a good basis for what we know we might want to address in the state plan. I still don't know about COVID. I'm trying to figure that out. But I also think, and maybe this is an appropriate time to talk about it, we did not talk in the priorities letter about justice involved. And there is an opportunity that NASHA, the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators, is making available to some states. And this may be something that we decide that we want to add into our statewide plan. It doesn't really come up in the needs and resources assessment. You know, and we didn't identify it. We had something, I think when we did a specific search for 3 years in our database, we only had something like 42 calls from individuals who were justice involved, but we know that not everybody who is calls us. So, you know, part of this is an issue of where would we like to put some time and attention going forward, and how might this maybe even inform our next grant application. So Chris, I'm going to beg upon you for just a minute to talk a little bit about the Criminal Justice Academy information and share that with everybody as a consideration point.
Okay. So this is a brand new opportunity that's come out from NASHA, and it's kind of an expansion on the technical assistance that they've been able to provide before, but in a very concentrated way, a very dedicated way around a topic area. And they did choose justice-involved individuals because of the number of folks in the system who either have an identified brain injury or might have had one. Virginia's done some previous grant work on this related to the juvenile justice system. Basically, what we would be doing is for $10,000, would be purchasing a year's worth of planning consultations, using that time to identify, invite in partners, and developing a very specific work plan for implementation. And this would happen between January and December of next year. It involves some one-on-one consultation, some peer work with any other states that are participating. It's my understanding as of this morning, 5 other states have indicated interest. I don't know who they are at this point in time. I don't think that's a secret. I just don't know who they are. And some group sessions and an annual conference, with the goal being that at the end of December, we have a work plan about how to make some inroads in this issue. We would propose, if we moved forward, that we would use existing federal grant funds to pay the $10,000 for this technical assistance. And we would set aside a little bit more to start inviting any other state partners to join us. And then we'll be putting together our next federal grant application late winter, early spring. And we would, if we move forward with this, we would put into that grant application the money for implementation starting in January 2022. We're still waiting. ACL doesn't know yet if this is going to be a 3-year or a 5-year grant. And of course, it's a competitive grant. So fingers crossed that we would get it, because otherwise I think Ann starts keying my car whenever she can find it. So Virginia has a long history of success with these grants. Donna, Donna and I have kind of, as we meet each group, we look for feedback, appreciate Kara and the executive committee's feedback, and that led us to you guys. Donna, do you want to articulate one of the questions that popped into your head that you're struggling with?
So, yeah, I have 2 concerns. One of them is the timing, because this application does span grant cycles, and so there's some uncertainty in that. But the bigger question I have is, I think this could be really valuable, and I know that Virginia's done some really good work around criminal justice and juvenile justice in the past. But we've spent a whole lot of time and effort in recent years working with substance use professionals and mental health professionals, and kind of getting that connection made, and now hopefully to build on it. And are we splitting our efforts too thin? I mean, are we trying to serve too many populations with specific large goals? Or is it something we can do? Does the question make sense?
That's a great question, and that's similar to what I brought up. It just in terms of bandwidth.
Yes.
Yeah,
Is there capacity within the organization to support an initiative that's very important? I would not disagree. I think it's a really pivotal issue. My concern is, does DARS have the bandwidth from the year 2022 onward to do implementation?
Well, you know what?
and that's, I don't know.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Donna.
No, go ahead, Ann. It was just me agreeing with Kara.
Well, you know, I had some of those same thoughts. Back when number one, I'll say that the part of the reason that they started with the Criminal Justice Academy with NASHA is not necessarily indicative of priority. It's indicative of where they already had resources. Colorado has done a tremendous amount of work in this area, and they're building off of that to grow other state programs. So it was like low-hanging fruit for NASHA, since they've actually hired the state person who did all of this, number one. Number two is, it's an interesting place to be in Virginia right now. Back when we did the juvenile justice study, we chose juvenile justice because we felt like we'd get a lot more grace if we were talking about kids than if we were talking about adults. However, that being said, we now have a Democratic General Assembly who put a lot of effort into criminal justice reform in the last special session. So that's another consideration. And, I think probably the last one is, well, maybe not the last one. I do agree with Donna that some of the work that we've been putting into creating better dialogue with the Department of Behavioral Health would be easy to build on and make some sense. And then I guess maybe the last thing is that while this is an important issue, it's not one that bubbles up for the vast majority of Virginians. Housing, we know that people are having trouble accessing behavioral health services. We get that a lot. We get, financial hardship a lot. We get community-based supports a lot. So I think the bandwidth question is a really good one.
Yeah, and so for me, having worked in this field in my previous job, both of these audiences are really hard to reach audiences.
Yes.
And considering the political environment that we're living in right now, this may not be the time criminal justice wants to try another thing. Although I think it would be exactly what they would need to alleviate some of the problems that have been getting the media. I don't know. That was the other thought I had. Is this the right time to be asking those professionals to do more, even though the more would ultimately help them?
I want to start here. Thank you, Donna. Thank you very much. I want to offer this thought. I want you to hear it in the spirit of just thinking things through, because I truly do not fall one side or the other on this. But one of the things about this application is they encourage us to look at kind of the continuum of criminal justice services and to pick a point on that spectrum and focus there, rather than casting a wide lens on the whole system. And when Donna and I went through and kind of did a deeper dive at each of these intercept points, as they refer to them, where we might recommend considering this is kind of at the end of the system. So at the point where people are prepping for reentry, and then when they get into the community, when they return to the community and are in probation and parole. So we would be focusing our lens narrowly, but it's still a lot of bandwidth, to use Kara's analogy. But I just want to make sure people don't think that we're saying we're going to go in and change the whole system. We wouldn't necessarily be working with police on the street, because I think Donna raises a good question, just how much stress can that system take? This would be working with things like reentry councils, educating probation and parole people, helping with those warm handoffs to community-based services. Still a lot of work. Still a lot of work. All of 2021 would be spent in the planning and putting together the work plan. 2022 would be implementation. And how would it draw? How would it draw away from mental health and substance use? We know there's some intersections there, but that is a key question.
When is the application due, Chris?
End of this month, last day of November. It's not a hard application process, so it's something, and it's pretty much, if you're interested and your state's in and has $10,000, then so I'm not as worried about that as just making sure it's right for us.
Well, I was asking more whether or not this was something that we needed to talk about in the January council meeting, but the timing won't work.
Yeah.
So
pending your feedback, I'm going to just kind of send some notes out to council. And we have feedback from the executive committee, we'll have some feedback from you, and we'll just put it out there that if anybody wants to weigh back into me with any questions or opinions, that we'll use all that in making, in talking with the DARS leadership and making a final decision.
What sort of numbers are we talking about in terms of affected people? Do we have any handle on that?
Well, the research that's been done in other states shows shockingly high numbers of individuals who have a brain injury that become justice involved. When we did the study with the Department of Juvenile Justice, more than half of the kids screened positive for a brain injury. In studies that have been done in other states, the numbers have ranged anywhere from 50% to even 100% in one study that looked at inmates on death row. So it's not it's a significant problem in the justice involved. But, once you start peeling back the brain injury onion, whether that's homelessness or behavioral health or domestic violence or, brain injury starts showing up.
Yeah.
Would, Chris, would DBHDS be a partner, kind of an implementation partner here where they would be really willing to be in this, walking through this with us?
Excellent question, Kara. And, some of that we can do some initial checking in, but to me, that's part of the beauty of the year of planning. And it's over the course of that year, we would be, as we decided where we were going, reaching out to those partners and bringing them in for discussion and hoping that by the end of that 12-month period, if we've got the partners in place, then we know we can move forward into implementation. If we've butted up against, challenges or barriers, or the world changes again, then we have to regroup. So the good news is they say if you've already got partners on board, put that in your proposal. If part of what the work you need to do in developing a work plan is reaching out to those partners, then that'll be then put that in there.
Chris, let me ask you a question. You made some comment recently, can't remember where or when, but something about getting some behavioral health staff taking an opioid and brain injury course.
We do. We have, they're just about to start. We have 10 frontline substance use technicians from across the state in the CSP systems that we're paying for them to take one of Dr. Lemsky's classes, an online class. He's one of the faculty. So they'll be taking, I can't remember how many sessions between now and the end of December on how to adapt their services for individuals with substance use disorder and a brain injury. And then what we'll be doing is Don and I will be meeting with them in January to learn, number one, what did they feel about the quality of the content? Will it be useful in their practice? You know, because Ann, we had been talking about, you know, together with BIAV, bringing Dr. Lemsky here after seeing her at SOS. The other is to start, if they did have a good experience, they start kind of becoming champions and mouthpieces for us to spread the word.
I guess the reason that I'm asking is it sort of seems to me like if that's an investment that we're currently making and we've spent a lot of time and effort, you know, if it doesn't make sense for us to just sort of keep down that road. I don't know. There's almost no wrong answer because it's all needed. It's just a matter of, you know, sort of what we decide to build on and where we go. So
and that's exactly where my brain was going. We've spent so much time and effort to get to this really important, very underserved population. Can we split away now?
Well, and you know, one of the things that shows up in the needs and resources assessment and that the council wanted to build back in was this issue of neurobehavioral. And, you know, I don't know.
I'll say another advantage of pursuing this that I appreciate is the opportunity to work and partner more closely with other states. I think that there's a lot that can be learned. You know, when we were doing the neurobehavioral report, we interviewed a number of states and there was a great exchange of information. So I think that's I mean, to me, that would be added to the pro list.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know that we're going to come up with a decision today about whether or not we should participate in the Clinical Justice Academy. I think that may be a decision that's ultimately made by DARS, but we've provided some feedback. I am sort of mindful of the time, and I do want to spend some time talking about developing the work session at the January meeting, because we're really going to have to flesh that out in December so that we're ready to do that in January. So
thank you for taking this time for it, Ann.
sure.
I really appreciate that.
Sure.
And everybody, thank you for your thoughts and your feedback. If you have, you know, if you've got those driving around in the shower thoughts, go ahead and shoot them my way. I would love to hear them.
Well, we can send out the information referral data that we got and the unmet needs data and all of that as part of our environmental scan. You know, we've been able to find a few things and create a few COVID resources. So we can include that as part of some information that we send out to you all. Once we do that, then perhaps next month we can talk about what you've seen and how or if we share that information as part of the work session of the council in determining the statewide plan. We'll look at the priorities letter. We can look at the unmet needs and some of the information that comes out of the needs and resources assessment. And we can look at some of the information about COVID. We can present some of the information about the Criminal Justice Academy if that's something that we have made the decision to pursue, because that would be part of the environmental scan. So we can review that, I think, briefly. And then in terms of actually getting some feedback from folks at the Brain Injury Council, we can approach that a couple of different ways. We talked about the idea of, you know, pre-populating topic areas and getting folks to endorse them by, you know, wandering around the room with the dots. We've talked about the idea of conducting several small group discussions that are perhaps facilitated by members of this work group. And so that's preliminarily what we've talked about in terms of the work session. There will probably need to be some time set aside for a presentation to set folks up for the conversation. So we'll need to build that into the agenda as well. So that being said, I'm curious to know what you think about the idea of, pre-populating some topics and getting folks to generate some goals and objectives that may be too much to do at the January work session. I'm curious to know whether you think we may be able to gather that information and do it ourselves if we have some small group conversations. What is it that you all envision when we talk about a work session for council feedback for the development of a statewide plan?
I imagine some small group opportunities for discussion. I think that may be less intimidating and more participant focused if we can do some of that.
How would that be impacted by the whole public meeting, online, live stream, YouTube joy?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to think through, because we can't go into rooms because we're being live streamed, and the council meeting has to be live streamed. So I'm not sure how we do that, or if maybe that happens by email beforehand. And I need to talk to the policy people a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine
George may
emails
have some insight from his experience.
Yeah, so we tended to collect that kind of information through the work groups, which were set up with specific goals of the existing state plan. So we had that framework already, and so we had a dementia state plan committee like this committee, but then each work group was also working on their specific goals to refine and devise new objectives and refine what was there. And so it was a little bit different, and we kind of presented the full commission with a take it or leave it. Well, here's your chance if you haven't already had input in through the work groups and there were only a few people who weren't on one of the work groups. So I mean, I like the idea of pre-populating. I think we have to be clear again about what's our objective. What are we going to get out of this session? Are we expecting to come out with, these are going to be our 4 or 5 goals, and we have already some recommendations that we can plug into, maybe need some wordsmithing, but we can plug into the eventual state plan? Or are we looking, I mean, I think we've had some very general feedback already, and so I think in terms of our timeline and stuff, our goal for this should be to, this should be the last time they see it until we give them a draft. And so I like the idea of they can generate some ideas, or maybe we have some broad, like 5 broad topic areas that people can put, this goes maybe under here, and I mean, in terms of the electronic meeting, we can use the whiteboard function to do this. So we can have, for a slide sitting here, instead of with the agenda, you just have 2 lines making it into 4 spaces, and people can use their whiteboard annotation or the chat, and Donna can put it up there of what the ideas are so that everybody can see them. But so I think it's more what we need to decide, I feel like, is what we want to get out of that.
Well, and I think I'm trying to, sort of go through in my head what the process would be. I've never used the whiteboard function, so that's a little tough for me to conceptualize, but I was thinking about, we can't necessarily recreate this whole idea of wandering around the room and putting stickies for the ones that you really endorse. So I have no idea how that works when we have to do this virtually. I don't know if this is just something that we draft 4 or 5 topic areas. We have the ones that were in the priorities letter. If we decide to do criminal justice, we throw that in, and we maybe identify something else. I think though, if we do housing and neurobehavioral and data and criminal justice, I can't remember what the last thing in the priorities letter would be, but that would be 5 broad areas. And then we just throw it out to folks. What would you like to see some objectives or activities be in here? The problem with that is that, you can go off on flights of fancy when you don't know exactly what it is we're trying to do or the parameters under which we need to work. And that can be frustrating for a lot of people, particularly if people are giving lots of ideas and you have to poo-poo them because that's not what we're doing. And I don't want people to be frustrated in that respect. So, an endorsement of something that we've drafted would probably be the easiest in terms of managing the process. Would you guys agree with that?
I think that's a step in the right direction. And maybe instead of making it binary, like I endorse it or I don't, we could think about using the Zoom polling feature, which would still stream to someone who's watching. There might be, for instance, we might have 5 preset categories. Maybe we talk a little bit about each of them. And then we could put up a poll that asks individuals to, maybe on a scale of 1 to 5, what level of priority do they think that this is for the council? Or it could be a yes or no. Do I endorse this? I don't endorse it. Like, we might just be able to use the polls to capture some quick feedback, open up for some conversation, then move on to the next category. That's the most engaging thing I got.
Then I'm wondering sort of about the mechanics of getting that done. So I went back and I looked at the priorities letter. And so one of them is community-based services, and that drills down to some specifics like housing and crisis management and caregiver supports and that sort of stuff. The second thing is, to address disparities that result in wait lists and absence of services. There's one on data sharing, and then there's the mention about including the neurobehavioral stuff. So some of that lends itself, well, I guess all of it lends itself in a way, but I guess my question needs to go back to DARS now. And that is, we had talked at the last meeting that you guys were going to write this. And so I don't know if coming up with the 5 broad areas and doing all of the stuff to do the YouTube polling and all of that is your job in the next month, so that we see that and can give you some feedback that you can work from before the actual January meeting.
I was just getting ready to say, we're here for you. We're from the state government. We're here to help. So, yeah, we would, Donna and I would definitely be willing to draft that up and put that out to you all for feedback. That is part of our job.
Well, if we approached it from the areas that we included in the priorities letter and 1 or 2 that we added in, then you guys could draft some possible hybrid goals, some that are aspirational and some that are attainable under each of those for folks to respond to. And then that gives us the ability to perhaps leave room for individuals at the council meeting to say, well, what about this? Or what about this to add into another area? So if we had broad areas of community support, parity of services, statewide parity, data sharing, maybe something around behavioral health to include the neurobehavioral stuff, and possibly criminal justice, depending on the decision DARS makes. That's 5 to start with, and then we can leave room for other suggestions that come up during the meeting.
Does education and risk reduction fall under one of those? Is that
not risk reduction, but education did. It fell under community supports.
Okay.
Yeah. Community supports included crisis management, case management, housing, caregiver support, and provider education.
Okay.
So how does that sound? We will work on, and I'm trying to just sort of repeat and re-summarize so we've all got it straight. We can send out some information about the environmental scan, whether that's a summary of the I&R stuff. Maybe we could just resend the PowerPoint that we did for folks as part of our environmental scan and count that. We could, BIAV could look to see what we can find in terms of some of the COVID implications and throw that in there. And then what DARS would do is that they would begin drafting, 5 broad areas that we just sort of outlined with perhaps some pre-populated goals and objectives that meet both aspirational and attainable sort of characteristics. Then we'd have that information for folks, and we could, when we have the council meeting, just sort of review those and see what folks had in terms of additional comments on the environmental scan, for example. And then we turn it over and we talk about the populated 5 broad areas and some of the goals. And if we could use, the polling feature, if that seemed appropriate, then that may be the way to generate some feedback from everybody, including those people that don't speak up at meetings.
We just have to double check that the polling shows up on the YouTube.
Right. So we'll leave that to you. It does?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll leave that to you guys to sort of figure out how that piece works. So, Donna, if you could send out, a copy of another state plan. I don't know if we want to decide which one or we want to just give them a list, because that's what we did during the council meeting. I just threw out there some of the ones we'd looked at. And then provide the PowerPoint of the I&R assessment that we did. Those 2 things could go out now, or, in the next couple of weeks. And then in December, BIAB could plan on sending something out related to COVID and what the environmental scan on that might look like. And then that's just another little thing that keeps them thinking about this in preparation for the January meeting. And then at the January meeting, we sort of review the results of the environmental scan. We review what DARS is able to come up with. We figure out a way to generate their feedback and then move forward from there. Does that sound like it's gelling to folks?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I know that one of the state plans that when we met in October, we were talking about how we liked the Iowa plan because it was so accessible to the audience of brain injury. So I would suggest that should be one of the plans that we would send.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Thanks, Kara.
I'd have to go back and look at my emails because I know that when, when I reviewed them all, I gave Chris my top 3 and I don't remember what they were. I think Iowa was on the list. I think Missouri might have been on the list.
Yeah, Missouri, and
Iowa gets pretty granular in terms of some of their objectives. So that might be nice for them to see. Missouri's, I think, is less specificity and just a sort of a broad policy document in some ways.
Well, I think it could also prime us to think down the line about audience. And I don't know if it'll come up in the January meeting, but there might be a future meeting where we talk about it in council. Like to whom are we writing?
Yep. Well, and I think that gets back to that, is it a guidance document or is it an actual working document? And I think that question would be easier for council members to maybe weigh in on once they sort of see what that might look like. We're asking them to, sort of weigh in on things that they haven't necessarily seen yet. We've been talking about this, but they haven't. We've been looking at it, but they haven't. So. So I agree about Iowa. Maybe we'll look and see if there's something that counterbalances that in terms of a little less granularity for them to look at and more, 5-year planning or something. I don't know. We'll take a look at that. But I think we've got some good marching orders. I think I think I'm clear, and Dars, you guys understand what your job is in the next month. And speaking of, what your job is in the next month, one of the things that we'll need to do is set up a time to meet in December. So, Dr. Meixner, we'll start with you. I don't know if, if we keep on the same schedule of the second Tuesday. I don't know what you look like on the 8th or some other time, maybe that week.
I wouldn't be, well, on the 8th, I'd be available at after 3 o'clock. If that works for everyone. Could also look at other times.
I have the Alzheimer's Commission that day, and I'm not. I mean, we should be done well before then, but then there's often some running around to do afterwards. So after 3 would probably work for me.
I have a call at 4 that day, so I could do 3 if we got off at 4, or I don't know if there's another day that week.
Wednesday is almost completely free for me because I don't teach that day because it's actually like an exam day. So anytime before 4 o'clock, I have a 4 o'clock meeting, but anytime Wednesday.
How would you feel about 10 o'clock on the 9th?
Works for me.
Chris, Donna, Victoria, does that work for you? 10 o'clock on December the 9th?
It works for me. It's Victoria.
Okay.
Great.
Change that to 10 a.m., Donna.
Oh,
Okay, well then, we'll make a decision about whether or not we want to send 2 copies of the state plan. I think Dars and I will relook at the ones we went over, and then I'll see what I can pull together for the COVID stuff. They'll see what they can pull together in terms of just a draft outline for us to be looking at for the January council meeting. So how's that?
It's really a pleasure to work with you guys. I really, really, really appreciate it. This is fantastic.
Ditto. We're glad you're on board. It took us a while to get you, Chris. So glad you're here.
I just feel lucky to get to join this ship, so I'm thankful every day.
All right, then our plan for December will be to sort of review all of that stuff, see how close we are, and tighten up the plan for the January meeting. Does anybody have anything else before we wrap up today? Okay. All righty then. And if you guys like Chris was saying, shower thoughts, driving down the road thoughts, if anything pops into your head, please feel free to share them. I mean, I know that we're not supposed to be conducting business, outside of this meeting, but the occasional email is fine, particularly when you have a really inspired idea. You can send an email and just sort of share that with all of us. So I encourage you to do that. And we'll see where we go. But in the meantime, since I won't talk to any of you guys again, have a lovely Thanksgiving, however you decide to hold it this year. And may your turkeys be large, unless you're a vegan, and then may your tofurkey be large.
And thank you, Joyce, Betsy, and Captainer Dawn. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
you guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, George.
Hey, Joyce.
Bye, Joe.
How you doing? I wanted to get that in before you hang up.
Oh, I'm well. How are you doing?
Great, great. My camera not working today, so that's why you didn't see me. But anyway,